taking it upon ourselves to be right at the heart of it all, only on Checkpoint.
This is KTN News.
Thank you for staying with us. You're watching Front Row as we continue to delve into matters education in times of this COVID-19 pandemic. And right now I want to invite my co-host Mwalimu Frank Otieno just to take some of your questions and feedback as we aim to have a very engaging discussion. Mwalimu, I don't know what you have so far.
Yeah, asante sana. First of all, I also want to encourage Kenyans kwamba we are very free. We can speak Swahili and English. So kwa hivyo mtazamaji wetu ambao uko labda maeneo ya Kwale, Kilifi na kadhalika, usiogope kutuma swali, angalau hata kwa Kiswahili bwana tutasoma tu. There is a viewer called Nicholas who has an issue about something to do with the issue to do with the school fees. And they're saying parents are being coerced right now. They're being coerced to pay school fees, yet the school calendar is not really known. So maybe I'll ask our director, Agudi, to play that clip, then we can throw that question to Madam Kasanga.
My name is Nicholas Odhiambo. I've got an issue on the fees charged on the online training courses offered by different learning institutions. A case at hand is whereby a student is asked to pay the entire second term's fees in a course which is supposed to be practical. This is a culinary arts courses, which is the food production. I am wondering as a parent that I'm required to pay the second term's fees and the students are going to undertake online trainings. And to make it worse, the parents are asked to buy computers worth 26,000 shillings, which are already coordinated by the school's management. So I'm wondering why the school is in a hurry to conduct online courses for courses which are meant to be practical, and why could they wait for the COVID-19 to end so that the normal education or training can resume? Throwing this to the educational sector or the stakeholders in education to advise on the way forward.
Thank you, Nicholas. You see, that one is an issue that we really have to raise with the people concerned. And definitely I have to take this question directly to Madam Mutheu Kasanga because they are the ones who have been having this back and forth issue to do with going to court. Parents are saying, oh, we don't have this and that. So that parent there is raising an issue about why do we have to pay school fees and why do we have these additional commitments financially? So maybe we can allow Madam Kasanga to talk about it?
I guess from the question that this is TVET, this is technical training. And in fact, in the last 2 weeks alone, TVETA has issued their guidelines for online and distance learning courses. This is something that this is the future. This is the future. That said, exams for the TVET section were postponed. They were meant to have some exams in April, and they have been postponed. So we are urging all colleges as well to remember that this is what is happening. I urge all affected parents to literally just talk to their institutions. This is a consensus thing. Online courses in TVET are not new to the world. They are only new to Kenya. If you walk to Singapore, if you walk to India, if you know, all these technologically advanced countries have means and ways of ensuring that students don't have to stop learning because of this pandemic. So my quick answer for that particular parent is that this is the way of the future. I'm surprised that a post-secondary student has no access to devices, and this again points to the digital divide. This is where I would urge colleges to come in and support parents, perhaps to split the payments for these devices the way universities do, where parents are not forced to pay upfront for these devices, where the cost of the devices is spread along the 3 semesters or something like that. Because this is the way, this is the future, this is the future. I cannot now stand here and tell you, no, this is not correct. No, this is the future. This is the way the world is going. This pandemic has forced everybody in education to wake up and see what the rest of the world has been doing. And perhaps this is where we are getting our skills mismatch. We have been teaching a very old-fashioned way, while the rest of the world teaches in better ways, and therefore our young people are not able to fit in the industries that we have in the country. And this for us in the long term, this is something we must think about. So TVET has already got the regulations and the framework for online and distance learning. I urge all colleges to look at them and let us look to the future post-pandemic. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Mutheu Kasanga. There's a tweet here from Jonathan Wesaya Maina. He says that there is a need for us to go and ensure that these learners and teachers go through something called psychological and emotional therapy. So I think this is an issue that maybe we shall raise with Dr. Sarah Ruto later on, because the ministry has to come out clearly and talk about how are they prepared to ensure that learners are taken care of. Now, we also have some tweets here. Mkizito, to all speakers, please, in your discussion, suggest what the Ministry of Education should do with learners during this COVID-19 period. He also goes ahead and says, let speakers use this forum to tell parents and guardians to encourage learners to do individual revision of what they have covered so far during the COVID-19 period, learning to learn and self-efficacy as competences under CBC. We have somebody called Rob. We appreciate that we are in an abnormal stretch in the education of our children. Mr. Sosion should for once shelve his union activism and assist in offering solutions. Mr. Sosion, you've been told something about your activism. Then again, Sewe here says, Mr. Sosion, is the government going to recognize the school calendar? Then you also have Josek Kwea Olala. He says, in my rural home of Lugari, Western, Marakusi, there is no electricity. Children have never seen a computer. Smartphones still a riddle to them, leave alone bundles. Parents and children, neither do they know how to use digital devices. Does this sound a blasphemy to the poor children in rural? So let's leave it at that. Maybe I threw it back to Sharon.
All right, and just to pick one of the questions there, which was directed to Mr. Sosion, and Dr. Sarah actually can also add to this, whether we are thinking of reorganizing the school calendar. And of course, the Education CS Professor George Magoha today issued guidelines stating that the second term midterm break will be shortened by 4 days and the August holiday by 2 weeks in order to, recover lost time, particularly with regard to covering the syllabus. And Mr. Sosion, do you think this will help in covering the syllabus, time lost in terms of covering the syllabus? Usually it's supposed to be covered by September, particularly for the candidates who are meant to sit their exams. So is this going to work? And of course, this will only happen should the situation get stable with regard to COVID-19.
This evaluation of the instructional period of learners across the board, and the strategy of reopening schools that has been announced by the minister, and which we agree is in conformity with the global guidelines through UNESCO, through UNICEF, and through International Agency Network for Education in Emergencies. And this is just a proposal, because nobody is very sure about exactly what will happen by the month of June. Probably the virus could be at its worst, and we may not open schools. But if it shall have been contained, then schools shall resume. And I've stated right from the beginning, who knew that we would abruptly shut down schools in Kenya on the 16th of March. It was very abrupt at the onset of the virus. So holding things constant, that the Global World Health Organization protocols that nations and citizens are encouraged to follow in containing COVID-19, which we urge Kenyans to comply with the Ministry of Health guidelines. And if the virus is contained and naturally we resume normal learning in the month of June, then there is need to be creative and innovative and reorganize the programs of the term. The proposal by the Cabinet Secretary is a proposal that is placed before Kenyans. And we think we, as citizens, we should be able to give our views in what we think should be done best. We have been very clear that we should not talk about rescheduling or cancelling of examinations. But depending on exactly when we resume, then the country needs to reorganize through the Ministry of Education the calendar of the remaining part of the year, which the minister gave a proposal today. And I would say, yes, we don't need a long midterm anymore. We don't need a long holiday anymore. Let us walk back and look at it from November to January. Students were out at home, and then they were out in school briefly for 2.5 months. And now we are out for another long period. We've got to be innovative, and how to resume schools globally has been given through UNESCO and through UNICEF and other global institutions. So it is not just a domestic wake-up thinking within this country. It's actually resuming schools within the global guidelines. And this is a global problem. We have seen in South Africa. They tried to recommend resumption of schools by mid of May. But of course, there were concerns from many stakeholders that students and teachers were not safe. And this was postponed. So the big question here is not...
All right, let's try to fix that technical issue with Mr. Sosion, but let me bring in Dr. Sarah. Of course, the guidelines that the CS gave today are in the hopes that, we will flatten the curve and everything, and we'll manage to have in control the pandemic. Suppose that doesn't happen in the coming month. Are there any preliminary thoughts on what this would do, on what would happen actually, or what the ministry would do and KICD regarding transition of classes and students?
During an emergency period, it has been found to be very important for a child's mental health, and I'm glad one of your viewers brought it up, that one retains a semblance of normalcy, a semblance of what children were doing before. And education plays a very key role. And education in this case, the formal time in which learning happens. So it is very important that we try as much as possible to bring this. We are not saying that this is a replacement or even a replica of what would go on when a teacher is there with the learner. But it is something close to, because you have organized lessons happening which have been recorded with trained teachers who know their content, and this is what is being availed through various broadcast means. So if this was to continue, I see this as a very important option that we need to pick up. And what we are therefore doing at the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is to take very seriously this new role that we have been given. Because like I mentioned before, radio classes, the Edu channel was there as a supplementary. Now it is going to become the main option of offering curricular-based content. Remember, there are very many other providers that are offering supplementary material. So this will be one of those. This does not mean that we are not cognizant of the fact that there are children who are being excluded.
And for those children and families who are being excluded, the solution that is needed for them is not only an education one, it's also a social one. And that is why sister ministries are also opening up social safety nets, because some people are not able to eat, are not able to access medical health care, and you cannot have learning happening if that is not happening. So that is important that that continues. And what I'd like to stress here is that there is always something somebody can do. There is always something a parent can do. And I think it is at this emergency period that this sense of citizen agency is called upon us, and all of us have it. We recently did a rapid assessment because we wanted to know what citizens are doing. And it was very gratifying to note that a third of the respondents who said they're doing something are individuals. And these individuals have taken it upon themselves to come up with solutions for their children, for their schools. And we cannot rubbish that. So as an institute going forward, we want to crowdsource these ideas, because we don't think that we are the only ones who hold it. Citizens have this, and we can crowdsource, bring people together so that we get solutions that make sense for our context, because our contexts differ. Infrastructure access in various places differs, but this does not mean that there's not something that is working. Therefore, if this was to continue, what we need to think about is the menu of alternatives that we are offering. The rapid assessment also showed that very many of the people who have access prefer use of WhatsApp, Google+, this new media. Even as the traditional media is there, we have to grab this, because any opportunity that offers a child learning is an opportunity. Whether it is a middle-class parent, even that middle-class parent has a right to these opportunities coming on, and we need to expand and ensure that children who are still left out, and there's a big proportion of vulnerable children, disadvantaged children who are left out, and this is where partnerships matter. So in the Institute, we're also sourcing around for various partners who have grassroots connections, because they're the ones who understand those contexts, and they can become a conduit to these homes. Because again, COVID has meant that you cannot even have community solutions. It has to be a household-based solution, because you have to maintain the social distance. And this menu of alternatives are there, and this is what we would want to expand if this situation continues.
Right, and briefly, before I bring Frank in, you have talked about children who are excluded, and let's talk about special needs learners. Are there considerations that have been made? Should we go ahead with the calendar and have the national exams as planned? That you'd find that many of the parents of the special needs children do not have the particular skills to meet their educational needs. What then happens to their learning in this time, and particularly when we come to their assessment, so that it's equitable with the other learners?
Special needs is an area that needs to continue expanding. And there are few things that are happening which we can celebrate as we continue to expand. For example, for parents who have TVs, and there are not very many, but the ones who have, there is now sign language signing that goes on as those lessons are going on. So this is one option for the parents that are able to access that. But if I'd like to come back to the question we've said on examinations. I think let us focus. When you do an examination, you do it because you want to gauge if a child has understood content that was planned over a particular period of time. So I think it would be a little bit premature of us to be talking about examinations when we haven't finished what we're supposed to be doing this year. So that discussion will come at a point. But and if schools do open in a month's time, then the calendar will be reorganized, and we ensure that the content that was supposed to be covered, the learning experience the child was supposed to get, that child gets it, so that everybody gets what was due to them. Then you can examine. And I'm hopeful that if we are doing that, then the disadvantage that especially the more vulnerable children are getting will be lessened. Because it is true, if you have a visually impaired child and you do not have braille materials, it will be very difficult. So these are where we need to expand more social safety nets and education to ensure that at least we access better education to all children.
Right. Frank, I don't know if you have a few more questions from our social media and from Slido.
Yeah. First of all, maybe let me thank Dr. Sarah Ruto there for her very good insights about the question raised. And just remember that Sarah says her name doesn't end with an H. It's Sarah, S-A-R-A. So the viewer should not think that we are making a mistake. Before I just go to the next bite, we have got Mr. Omusunga Peter. He says on Twitter that indeed the education sector has been greatly hit. Online learning is honestly impossible to almost 90% of our learners because of technological challenges. The issue, we encourage parents to supervise the revisions at home, watching from Teso South Sub-County. Thank you very much, sir. We also have Mr. Paul Kariuki from SHAP. He says we appreciate the digital learning gains among learners in private schools. However, isn't it going to create an imbalance with the leaders in public schools? Now, with all those concerns from our stakeholders, let me now introduce one of the stakeholders in the education who has an issue to raise with the Ministry of Education.
Hello, my name is Dr. Lucy Wakiaga. I am an educational consultant. I am currently based at Tangaza University College as a research associate. I would like to find out from the Ministry of Education if there is a crisis management framework that principals or school leaders can use to be able to manage the teaching learning environment in situations where there are unprecedented crises like what has been posed by the COVID-19 situation. I would also like to hear from the Ministry of Education if at all this framework does exist, do they think it is sufficient or it will need to be revamped? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lucy Wakiaga. They are raising an issue that she really wants to be addressed by the ministry. And I think definitely we should just throw it right away to Dr. Sarah Ruto so that we are at par with whatever the ministry is having in terms of crisis management, because she has talked about crisis management. Do you really have something in place, Dr. Sarah Ruto?
I cannot answer that at the moment. I do not recall reading of such. Perhaps it is there because the ministry is big. We have the Teaching Service Commission. So Dr. Lucy, I would probably have to consult, and the good part is that I have your number. I'll get back to you, and hopefully, Frank, if we do get the answer, we will get back to you.
Very much, Dr. Sarah Ruto. I know government is always very, very careful. You calculate the way you respond to certain issues. But of course, we shall be going to discuss more of that when we come after this break. Stay tuned.
Help women find independence by training them in fish farming. It's tough on my back, joints, and can cause headaches. Panadol Extra relieves multiple types of pain. Panadol Extra, now with new Optizorb technology to fight multiple tough pains with 3 times more pain-relieving medicine in the first 30 minutes when you need it most. Seeing them support themselves makes any pain worth it. If symptoms persist, seek medical advice.
Safe Ramadan practices in the context of the COVID-19, brought to you courtesy of His Excellency Honorable Mohammed Abdi Mahmoud, the Governor, County Government of Wajir. Healthy hygiene. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water. Frequently clean often touched objects such as doorknobs, light switches, and stair railings with detergents and disinfectant. Enforce routine cleaning of venues where people gather before and after each event using detergents and disinfectants. Safe Ramadan practices in the context of the COVID-19, brought to you courtesy of His Excellency Honorable Mohammed Abdi Mahmoud, the Governor, County Government of Wajir.
ukiwa wewe ni mjane, haisababishi wewe mtoto wako ndio aingie kwa gaidi. Haisababishi wewe mtoto wako aingie kwa drugs.
BBI version of evicting people and profiling Kenyans on tribal lines, or are you still on the BBI of uniting Kenyans?
Kuna county inaweza kuwa bila infrastructure. Ukweli au uongo?
Watoto ambao hawajakosea mtu yoyote. Hili ni piko kubwa.
Wamegonga tukutuku wakijaribu kuzuia wale, ni kama walikuwa wanazuia wale polisi ili wasiwa
ama viazi vyetu twende kuviuza mbali sehemu kama Mombasa, kisha hawa waende kununua Mombasa tena warudishe tena kwetu.
Kabla sianze kufly, hizo watoto wakiwa wadogo wanadipute kama tunangamiza hapo tunamaliza.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back. The show is Front Row. Hey, ukae mstari wa mbele uchangie hoja. Professor Elijah Omwenga from Kabianga University, you are contributing by saying, I like the comment from Dr. Ruto. We need to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Madam Kasanga also says that we can't sit and do nothing when we have plenty of technological resources and options to utilize. Thank you very much, Professor Omwenga from Kabianga University. Of course, Mwalimu Vidija unasema kwamba kipindi kizuri sana, hoja zinajadiliwa kwa ukomavu, sekta ya elimu iko katika njia panda. Suluhu itapatikana pindi guma la corona litakapoisha. Asante sana Mwalimu Vidija Dasalu kutoka maeneo ya Eldoret kule. Now let me take this opportunity to kindly introduce a soundbite from one Michael Okiri, a teacher from Migori County, who is really raising concerns about agricultural projects that come with KCSE examinations.
Michael Okiri from Migori. I have a question about NEC project. By the time schools were closing, they were supposed to upload project marks for milestone 1. Some schools had uploaded, the students were still working on the same, and then they were ambushed and they went home. So my question is, how is the government going to bring balance between these two students, given that these are subjects that requires a lot of monitoring, and then a subject like agriculture is going to be highly affected by the flood and other environmental factors, so that some students are not advantaged and others disadvantaged?
Yes, Sharon Momanyi, that is Mwalimu Michael Okiri Obudo from St. Albert School, Ulanda, and is very concerned about projects to do with the NEC in terms of practical subjects. So I think this is an issue that has to be addressed by NEC so that we can have a way forward, because we now notice that teachers and the candidates are kind of confused. They don't know how will they handle this. Now with the term, you know, we also have rain, havoc, and so on. So you can imagine if a student had a portion of some garden somewhere, it has been swept away, and we also have this pandemic. So how will this candidate be examined? Kwako.
Right. I guess we want to hear thoughts on that, on practicals. And also, we saw the head teachers some time back proposing that in the time being, we have candidates going back to schools, at least the candidates only for this time. What they say is that this would avert a transition crisis, and noting that in some secondary schools there's already an issue, a crisis of congestion. And I'd like to hear from the teachers, and I'll start with you, Madam Kasanga, just to hear your thoughts on the same. Do you agree with this particular thought that should we need to wait it out a little bit longer? Is it a thought to have the candidates fast going back to school? Would it be more easy to control and manage that situation? Madam Kasanga.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's an interesting question that has all the teachers, we have all worried about the practical subjects and how we're going to move on. The CS on Sunday reassured us that we will start where we stopped. So that calmed us down a little bit, and it has, made all the teachers teaching the practical subjects feel a little bit at ease, given the scenario is exactly as the gentleman teacher has mentioned, that some had uploaded their first stages and others had not. So I think the CS did a lot of reassurance with his statement on Sunday that we would all start term 2 where we stopped, which means that we stopped 3 weeks before the end of term 1. So we shall be, I believe that will now put in place all the things as we go into perhaps what Mr. Sosion has alluded to, a crash program, sort of. We know now we don't need any more holidays. We just need to give kids a break just to make them not feel overwhelmed by education. But when we do come back, given the experience of West Africa, when they were managing the Ebola crisis, we all have to come together, parents, students, to agree that the condensed program is what is going to happen. And NEC will be on board, everybody, all of us will be together in agreeing that that is the way to go, because we don't have, and I'm alluding to the question from the professor as well, we have never had a crisis of this nature in the history of Kenya. So we are now learning on the hoof, sort of going and looking out and seeing the examples of any other country that is perhaps similar to us, and trying to do the best we can within our circumstances. So that is what we are expecting, that once we reopen, whenever we do reopen, we will have a very tight schedule, but we will not disadvantage any student, any school that had not reached at that stage, because NEC gives us timelines, and those timelines had not been exceeded. So we expect to pick up from there, and I believe we shall all be called upon, parents, schools, absolutely everyone, to come together and understand that time is not the one luxury we have this year, and work within those frameworks. Thank you. I think that's all I can add on that particular aspect.
Thank you.
Perhaps comment a little bit on special needs again, because I feel that perhaps the one area where we in the private sector have seen parents and students suffer is in the where kids are suffering from mental disabilities, and it teaches us a lesson. As we look forward and we look future and we start planning, we don't know now. This has happened, so we don't know whether it will happen again. But on the area of special needs, we've seen a real challenge in parents trying to manage the kids with mental disabilities. And this is an area that we in the private sector are going to be putting a lot of thought into seeing how homes and parents can, looking for solutions to assist parents. The younger the children are, the more difficult it is, and the particular disability as well. We are really having parents struggling in this time of COVID pandemic. Thank you.
I think it's comforting for any parent of a special needs child to know that a lot of thought is also being put to the education of their children. And also special consideration is with the cost involved, as this has always been an issue regarding special needs education. And now that we talk virtual education, I don't know how that translates. And I know a lot of thought is being put into that, as also is what Dr. Sarah had mentioned. Let's listen in to one more feedback right now and then continue with the discussion.
My name is Jasper. I am a teacher and an educationist. My concern is teachers who work in private schools and boards of management. You find that these teachers, they work without contracts. They work for very long hours. They can be dismissed at any time without being given due process. These teachers don't have a union to defend them, especially when their rights are infringed. So what is the government going to do to ensure that these vulnerable teachers are protected, because most of them are really suffering?
All right. I think this question has your name, Mr. Sosion, written all over it in terms of teachers working with no contracts and their conditions. And just your response to what Jasper has raised in terms of working conditions for teachers, no contracts, your response to that.
Yeah, I think that has been given clear global guidelines through UNESCO via International Committee on Sustainable Teacher Development for Agenda 2030 that number one duty of all government is to preserve wages and earnings of teachers. And I think this is a cardinal principle. And the private school investors should not take advantage of the COVID-19 and absolutely circumvent and engage in savings and disengage salaries and disenfranchise this group of teachers. That would be very, very inhuman. It is too early at this stage for anybody to convince us that the private schools cannot pay salaries. Yet again, the private schools are charging fees. That would not be right. And that is the cardinal guideline that has been given by UNESCO. And therefore, the country must abide, whether it's public or private schools. So the issue of preserving teachers' earnings and their jobs is clearly guided universally. And we've received several calls from teachers in private schools who cannot earn and who cannot live. This is not right. It is inhuman. It is too early at this stage for anybody to convince us in the within the private schools that they cannot sustain and pay salaries for their workers. Because after all, there is no evidence that parents have not paid fees. So that is wrong, and it's not right to disenfranchise this group of teachers. COVID-19 will come in also with people with negative intent and mischief, and it's not right to take a calamity to advance self-interest and protect the economic interest in terms of the private school. So if this is happening, it's fundamentally wrong, it's unacceptable, and it must be stopped. The private school investors must sustain their workers and their teachers on their payroll as guided by UNESCO. We must seriously focus. Of course, this COVID has brought in a lot of iniquity, and there will be iniquity there. And even though the government is grappling with new alternatives like technology, a lot has been said, like special needs education learners. What is their place in terms of the virtual learning and the new devices that we are trying to explore? Children in marginalized communities and children in poor households. We should reflect very strongly against the backdrop of sustainable agenda number 4, equity. Are we really going to achieve equity with all these alternatives? I agree, and this has been recommended by UNESCO, that government should work towards virtual learning as a solution for the future. It may not be a solution for this pandemic. And I think more importantly, as we reflect on the post-COVID, let us reflect more on what we think we should do in future so that when such a calamity comes in, the country should be ready. Resumption of school is one question that has come up, and the issue of examinations, the fate of practical exams. I believe as a country and the government and the ministry, this is where the ministry has scored very well. Reorganizing will mean even reorganizing the set of exams, the practical exam, and everything else. We recommend very strongly as a union that when schools resume, it should resume methodically and systematically and with conditions. Probably priority should be given to Form 4s and Class 8 to resume gradually under guided conditions so that we have normal resumption and we can allay these fears. But as of now, the focus should be how to flatten the curve. And
right.
Let us hope it shall be flattened.
Okay, and Dr. Sarah, a question has been asked that with this situation now, COVID-19, we've seen parents doing a lot of teaching to their kids, a lot of learning going on in homes, in different forms. A question has been asked, should we now consider decluttering curriculum by leaving some of the things that we can see that parents are already playing a big role in teaching their children things to do with cooking, things to do with some of the practical lessons that are in the CBC curriculum. The question is, now that we see the parents are already teaching their children, do we need to declutter the curriculum by removing some of these things from the curriculum?
You know, we have a saying that it takes a village to educate a child. And in that village, you will have a teacher, you will have a parent, you will have a pastor, you will have all sorts of people in it. And so we saw a situation, and this perhaps is because our curriculum was very examination-oriented, where perhaps undue pressure was put on the teacher, on the school, even to do those tasks that are best suited done by somebody else in a different sector. And perhaps one of the silver linings of COVID is that it has forced the nuclear family, or, whoever it is, to be closer together. And there are those tasks that perhaps are best done by a parent, or best started by a parent. For example, when you're talking about values. And if we are talking about the competency-based curriculum, value-based education is very key. Responsibility is very key. If you do not nurture responsibility at home, it will be very difficult for the teacher to do it and nurture it to become an ethos of the child. Perhaps in school, they will do it because they respect the teacher, but when they come home, they throw their books everywhere and nobody does it. So these are not things that really needed to have been left to the school. And if we were doing that, then this is reality check for us. The competency-based curriculum, another pillar is community service. That we need to start, and when you're talking about patriotism, for example, it starts from the little things that you encourage your child to do. Keeping the environment clean, picking a litter, when you see something wrong, having that sense of community, that sense of responsibility. We do not need to go to school to be able to do that. So there are many things, and in many ways, the COVID era is giving us an opportunity to bring to life those aspects that we are stressing in the competency-based curriculum, like the parental engagement and empowerment pillar. The parent is seen as very core in the overall success of their child. And this is the time for the parent to do that. And we are saying that there are simple things that a parent can do. We are not trying to make a parent to be a teacher. Like, for example, during this particular time, and I'd really like to encourage every parent to try and come up with a routine that works for them. And this routine to have some moment in which you keep to be the study moment, the learning moment, a formal learning moment for a child, be it 1 hour, be it 2 hours, be it 3 hours. A parent can support that to happen, and then the child will do self-study or will access radio or edu channel or whatever it is that they can do. And these are things that a parent can do. So if we organize learning in a way that each person partakes of their responsibility, I think we will have a good child and a useful citizen who will be there for the future.
Thank you, Dr. Sarah. Let's now take the last round of feedback, comments, and maybe we can take one more question before we come to an end. Frank Otieno, I don't know, feedback.
Yeah, not a question as such, but a concern from one Amos Kaburu. Right. He says, why are we not asking NEC to reform during this crisis? Why are they sitting pretty cool, waiting to arrive with those exams scaring everyone? Honestly, Corona is just too much. Why does such an institution behave like others? Should reform, but it's invisible. Okay, he says, Aish. I think it's just reminding us about something to do with this issue of 100% transition.
Right.
That now we should not really focus on exams as such. We should now appreciate that, okay, but are we really ready for that? I don't know whether is it achievable.
Okay, so I mean just transits the entire pool of students to the next level. And I see another feedback here from Kevin Wanje, who says, we already acknowledge a digital divide. Let's avoid decisions that will lead to an educational divide. Let the students have equal opportunities. I'll read one more from Amos Kitui. saying that the private sector has a moral duty to play in reducing the inequality. What are they going to do in helping those left behind? Similarly, what would government do to avoid the temptation of making decisions that look like punishing the sector? I think that's a good point to wind up, Frank.
Wonderful.
Right. And so that's where we're going to wind up. Many thanks for joining us, and we want to thank our panelists for being with us tonight. We've had Madam Mutheu Kasanga, Dr. Sarah Ruto, and Mr. Wilson Sosion. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us on our inaugural edition of Front Row. My name is Sharon Momanyi.
Frank Otieno is my name, Mwalimu.
Yes, have a good night.